Good morning, everyone. Welcome to webinar 5, The Driver's Edge, Competent Teams for Compliance. There'll be a few people arriving as we get started, but best to kick off on time, and the recording will be available afterwards as always. So, for those of you that have attended before, you've probably heard me introduce myself many times now, and thanks so much for sticking through to webinar 5. It's really great to have you here once again. A little bit about me, maybe things I haven't shared before so much. So I've been in this industry for about the last 20 years, equally sort of spent about 8 years in the government side and around 12 years on the RTO side. So working in a whole range of roles in RTOs, but with a very strong compliance and management focus during that time. So in the consulting role, I definitely bring that business mind to all of your consulting concerns, because I know that, we need to make sure that solutions work for your business as well as help you maintain your compliance. And that's what these sessions, the basis of these sessions as well. So we were going to have Brooke Lombard, our Managing Director, join us for this webinar today, but unfortunately she's a little bit unwell. But she was involved in this presentation in putting it together, because I really wanted her to share a bit about managing a team, because she's incredible at that and she has an incredible team here at RTO Works. So we'll be sharing a little bit of that side as well.
Leonie, sorry, I just want to jump on. We're not able to see the slides.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
thanks so much for letting me know. Give me
That's
2
okay.
seconds.
We're just looking at your lovely face. That's all right.
Oh, okay. Give me just a moment, guys. It must have stopped screen sharing on me.
Cool. Thanks, Leonie.
Share. Thanks so much for letting me know, Auburn. Is it showing up now?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks everyone. Nothing too exciting on those slides, just our intro slide. And there's my face that you would have been seeing anyway. Okay, so today's objectives, we're looking at workforce management, professional development, trainer credentials, and third-party agreements. And we'll have a hands-on group activity that you'll do in breakout groups around mapping team capability. It's always good to just, even though you might be using a completely different system in your own RTO, it's good to just get some ideas about different ways that you can map that team capability. So a big part of the revised standards for RTOs is the credential policy, which we'll go over a little bit in this session. Obviously, there's a lot of detail in that credential policy. There has been a few changes, which came in a little while ago around secondary teaching qualifications, and in conjunction with training credentials being able to be used for trainer, you can have trainers who were secondary school teachers and might be moving into the vocational education industry. So that's been a great improvement, meaning that we can access more trainers, a better workforce to pull from. Also, once again, we're able to look at trainers who've got the TAE 40110 certificate for in training and assessment. So yeah, being able to have trainers with that qualification again is also a great benefit to the industry. As far as making sure your trainer matrix and evidence is mapped to the credential policy, that's obviously extremely important. You want to make sure that your trainers are meeting requirements according to the credential policy. And obviously there's a lot of detail in there around working under supervision. So it's something that you'll probably have, that credential policy will be something you refer to a lot when you're onboarding a trainer. Your trainer evidence file, so that's all the evidence that you keep to show that your trainers meet those credential requirements. You need to make sure that's up to date. you also need to make sure you've got evidence of vocational currency. And I delivered a PD on this at an RTO yesterday, and there were some really great questions from the trainers around, especially when you've got your own business and that's the way you have vocational currency. How do you demonstrate that? How do you, what type of evidence will ASQA accept? We've certainly seen so far that ASQA, won't just accept an ASIC excerpt on its own. For example, if you own a business, they want to see more than that. So we've had them come back and say that's not enough evidence. They want to see more about the way you operate your business. Letters, so a HR letter. We've had someone that owned a franchise, but that wasn't enough. They needed to have a letter from the company saying, yes, this person does this role and performs these duties. So being an owner of a business is just not enough. You need to show that you're actively working in that industry. A great tool that I was talking to trainers about yesterday, it can be really great to use AI tools to help you to come up with evidence ideas. So, if you're struggling to work out, hey, what evidence could I use to show my industry currency? This is my experience. ChatGPT can come up with some really great options. You'll see it. I've seen you've all filled out the poll there, which is fantastic. It looks like most of you, 40% have done a full audit of their credentialing requirements and can see that they are on track and they're very confident. And the other half are pretty confident. And there's a few people that need to check. Hopefully everything is in order. But yes, it is really important to have a look at your trainer files in relation to the revised standards and make sure you are on track there.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you spoke about that they wouldn't, so say like if you're trying to back up evidence that someone is a sole trader, and you said they wouldn't just accept the ASIC expert, they'd want more. What more? Is it a stat deck saying this is my business? Is it invoices? What does it look like?
Yeah, so absolutely. So as I was saying before, in the case that we had recently, we got a letter. It was a franchise, and we had to get a letter from someone higher up in the franchise to say this is what.
So these guys, construction, it's going to be sole traders. There is no higher up. So what would they be doing?
Totally. Look, let me just start by saying ASQA makes the rules, definitely not us. And, we just have to find a way to work with them. But invoices, certainly we've used and they've been accepted. Photographs of work done. So especially
I think photos would work. Yep.
Well, photographs are great. We've had no complaints from ASQA when you've got invoices and photographs, even volunteering, even a letter if they've done something volunteering wise, a letter from the organization you volunteered for. But yeah, there's been no issue with invoices, especially, of course, sole traders are going to invoice for work. They have paid invoices. That's considered valid evidence. Yeah, and it's not that they need to be doing that every day. It's just evidence that so what I was explaining to the trainers yesterday is you want to be able to demonstrate that your trainers are current in the industry so that they understand how the industry is operating today, and they're up to date. They've got their finger on the pulse with what's going on. And, of course, if you're working, working in carpentry, working in trades, if you're out there and you're doing work today, you're going to be up to date. And, of course, we know our trainers. I said yesterday, I've never seen a trainer that's not up to date with what's going on in the industry. Even by training students, you are up to date. But we have to find a way to meet these. We have to find a way to meet these requirements set by ASQA. But it's probably that industry currency and that vocational currency is probably the area we see the trainers struggle the most, and it gets picked up a lot in audit. Okay, so workforce management. So in the revised standards for RTOs and the outcome standards, in standard 3.1, they state the workforce is effectively managed to ensure appropriate staffing to deliver services. And for the first time, we see that this applies to all staff in the organisation and not just trainers. Of course, you've always had to have facilities, etc., in place to meet requirements. But this time it's very specific that also you need to look at professional development for your entire workforce, basically. So yeah, you need to ensure your number of trainers and assessors and other staff are appropriate. And the activity we'll do a bit later today will give you an idea of some ways you might be able to demonstrate that. And also be able to track professional development for your whole team. We will include, after this webinar, we will include a template for tracking professional development for your team. So you'll receive that as a bonus when we do the mail out after this webinar. I'll get the team to put up the second poll question for you, which is, what is your biggest workforce challenge under the revised standards? Yeah, so that there will be different challenges for different RTOs. But it's definitely a great time to take stock and see how's your team operating. And I would say make sure if you are spending any money on PD, make sure it absolutely adds value to your organisation. It's not just a tick box exercise. And there's also a lot of free PD available out there as well that can be worth taking advantage of. So I can see with the responses, we've got 25% that are really confident they've kept up with PD requirements, 19% looking at managing their trainer assessor workloads, mapping trainer credentials, 6%. So that's an area where everybody's pretty clear, and that's great because there's not too many difference from the previous standards either. Looking at identifying skills gaps, yeah, that's 24%, totally makes sense. And yeah, if you are working with third parties, I think the scrutiny, there's nothing that's really changed in, what we need to do for third party delivery, but certainly we're seeing a lot more scrutiny from ASQA on third party agreements. So it's worth really looking at those. So you should be able to see those results on your end. Okay, so ongoing professional development. So it's obviously absolutely essential for compliance and quality. You want to make sure you're tracking that effectively. So we will include that free PD tracking template for everyone who's attending today, and also those who are signed up for the webinar who couldn't attend. When you get your recordings, it will be sent out. It's a great way to avoid stagnation, and it's also something to remember to put on your continuous improvement register. Your continuous improvement register is really it's a pivotal compliance document, and we're seeing more and more in audit that ASQA wants to see how, especially under the revised standards, how is your continuous improvement being documented? Is it relating to what's going on in your organisation? If that's done really well, that can go a really long way to smoothing things over with ASQA if there is an issue, because if they can see that it's not that, you're not expected to never make a mistake, but you are expected to always be on the ball with what's happening and making amends wherever you need to when something has gone off. I'll also get the team to pop up the next poll question. We've got a lot in a row today, and that is, how are you currently tracking your professional development for your trainers and assessors? So hopefully everyone is already on track with that, but if you're not, you will receive a great template today that will help. And if you already do have a great system with your trainers and assessors, you might just be able to tweak that for the rest of your team as well. Okay, so a little bit on high functioning teams, because obviously the RTO industry is a very challenging one. There's a lot of change to keep up with. There is a huge amount of regulatory burden on RTOs, and you do need a very high functioning team. And that's what we see all the time, that there's a lot of times RTOs are so different from each other, and some small RTOs, some people are doing all the work. One or two people might do what would normally be 10 different people's jobs in another RTO. So everybody has their own way of doing it, and the revised standards do make room for everybody delivering in their own way and all the different types of RTOs there are, because they're very broad, and that is good. But yeah, there are things that across the board can support teams, and definitely at RTO Works, Brooke has put together this slide for us today, but having that shared purpose, the trust and psychological safety. So, yeah, making sure that, you know, it's a supportive environment for everybody and everybody knows that there's someone they can go to, making sure you've got clear roles and accountability, open communication and mutual respect. And definitely what we have is, you know, there's, it's not a hierarchical structure. So sometimes in RTOs it can be very hierarchical, but we've definitely seen that it can work really well when people are, you know, everyone's role is really honored and that everybody is equal in what they bring to their role, and it is equally important because, you know, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And I would say one of the things I see a lot of the time, especially in the RTO space and where something's gone wrong and we need to correct things, is that sometimes people are given, so it's really important to give people autonomy, but you need to make sure that you're following up with people. And so you can't always take people's word for the fact that something has been done. You do follow up, I always say, is one of the most important aspects of managing. So yes, it's important to be able to trust your team, absolutely. No one wants to be micromanaged, but make sure you do follow up. You know, particularly in the trainer space, sometimes trainers get left to their own devices, and, you know, 9 times out of 10 that doesn't go so well, especially if they're, you know, just expected to keep their matrix up to date, etc., with no check-ins. Those check-ins are really important just to make sure everyone knows that they will be held accountable and that they need to stay on track, because it's very difficult at audit to suddenly get everybody's files organized, etc. And just going back to your poll here as well, how do you currently track your professional development? So some people are doing it digitally, which is great, 6%. Most people have a manual spreadsheet form or folder, and some are not tracking it or are working out how to track their HR, and nobody's tracking it externally, which is probably really good. I think it's really hard when it gets managed externally. I've been in RTOs where that happens, and it's sometimes difficult to get visibility until it's too late. So yeah, really good to see that nobody here is doing that at the moment. So a little bit on managing third-party delivery. As I said earlier, there really hasn't been many changes at all. It's probably just more that, you know, the revised standards do place, in my opinion, a stronger emphasis on the RTO's obligation to monitor third parties regularly and effectively. It's of course always been a requirement, but it's certainly something we're seeing ASQA take action on more often now, because I think there's an astronomical number of third parties outweighing how many RTOs there are, and ASQA's realized, okay, and they often where problems arise, major problems that ASQA pays attention to. So if you do have third parties, you know, as always, you've got to be aware that if you're the RTO issuing the qualification, all of the responsibility for that third party's behaviour falls to you to make sure you're on top of, because you'll be held responsible for whatever a third party might do. So ASQA doesn't really go after third parties at all, they go after the RTO. So yeah, just make sure you've got those agreements, that they are ironclad, and that you are monitoring those third parties, that you do take action if any non-compliance is identified, and that you document this monitoring activity. So it's not enough to just be monitoring without evidence. ASQA, as always, is only interested in evidence. Okay, engaging subject matter experts. I'm sure some of you do engage subject matter experts. There are very specific requirements around engaging subject matter experts, and they can be engaged for a range of things. It's a great way to stay connected to industry best practices. I've been in RTOs when, you know, you might have a teacher away, a trainer away unwell, and then you can call in an industry expert to come in for that day and deliver something under supervision. Also, you know, got to make sure you've kept in line with all the requirements. And also you can have a subject matter expert come in and do professional development with your trainers. It can be a way to document industry currency. It's, you know, if used well, subject matter experts can be very, very beneficial to RTOs. A lot of RTOs engage subject matter experts when doing validation panels, providing feedback on unit contextualization, supporting staff PD, assisting with simulated workplace activities, and even going in and giving motivational presentations to students about what's happening in the industry now. So I think that it's a resource that more RTOs could use to their advantage, and is definitely worth considering. And it can also solve some business challenges that come up as well. Okay, so we are up to our team profile activity, mapping team capability. So in the chat, Auburn is going to place a document that I'll get you all to download. If you're not able to download in the next minute or two, just maybe put a note in the chat and we'll see if we can help you, because it'd be really, it's the kind of document that you really need to look at. It's got a fair bit of detail in it, and you'll be discussing it as a group. When you go into, so you'll be put into a breakout room soon. When you go into that room, please unmute so that you can be part of the discussion, because that's the real value of having these sessions, I feel. So unmute, turn on your video if you can, like Kylie has. It's really great to be able to see each other's faces and network that way. If you can, pick a spokesperson to come back and share with the group when you return, because it's great to hear different groups come up with completely different ways of seeing things. And I think that's really valuable, because it opens our eyes to things we might not have considered before. All these instructions will also be in the task that you'll download from the chat. Auburn, if you just can keep an eye on the chat and make sure you can help anyone that's had any trouble accessing. So I can't see the chat right now. But you'll look at the roles in the spreadsheet, making sure that the right roles are assigned to the tasks. Are the responsibilities clearly distributed, or is there confusion? Is anyone listed as optional when they might actually be essential? And looking at the patterns in that document to see, you know, what's the strength of the team structure, what's the risks that may arise as a result of that team structure, and what professional development opportunities there are, just maybe to staff. And then when we come back, we'll get you to share your insights from the activity. So you'll be getting put into breakout rooms. It'll take about a minute, I think, because we have to do it individually. There's not a huge amount of people here today. Let's see. Yeah, we've got 3 rooms. Oh, no, there's a lot of people have come in as we started. So yeah, we'll have 3 rooms. Everyone's doing the same activity in their rooms. And we'll see you in 10 minutes. All right. Hi, everyone. I think you're all back in now. Okay. So it'd be great to get a spokesperson from group 1 to share a little bit about what you discussed in your group. Anyone from group 1 willing to share? All right. Hopefully you're able to hear me out there.
I can do group 3 if you want, Leonie, to get it started.
Oh, that would be great. Thanks, Kim.
No worries. So I had some lovely ladies in there, and we came up with a couple of things right at the last minute. We think one of the gaps for the 2 staff is that that there is PD for the quality auditing units, because they manage for the 2 staff that were working in the compliance section, that it should be listed there, not just we noticed that there wasn't a TAE, and we both all discussed how they don't have to have their TAE, but it would be good if they had their diploma in quality and assurance, so that could be listed on there as a gap. Risk, we all decided that managed risk and critical incident should be for both trainers as well and assessors. In fact, we thought the whole of the organisation should all have that PD. And was there anything else, ladies? I forgot the team structure, what we thought of the team structure. If Kylie, I think you were in the session with me. Can remember.
Yeah, I don't
Kylie?
think we came up with anything on the team structure. I can't remember.
Just that there was lots of PD, I think, is the only thing, is that looked like there was lots of PD. We got sort of down in the weeds of the units more than the whole structure. So that's what Team 3 came up with.
Yep, great. Yeah, there's some really good points. There's, and we definitely set up the example to have issues, and issues that we do see in RTOs from time to time as well, especially sometimes in a small RTO, people are doing unexpected roles. But it's a great way if you do map your team this way and against the jobs that you have in your organization. It can give you a really clear picture really quickly about where you might need to pay attention to something that might not have been on your radar. And they were great pickups, Kim. Is anyone from any of the other groups willing to share with us a bit about what you discussed? It would be great to hear from someone else as well.
I think I was in group 2.
Yeah.
We noticed potentially a gap is there's nothing on industry engagement. No's across the board there.
Yeah, great. And that's such an important area. And we see that all the time, that industry engagement gets. But the thing is, the irony is that most people in the organization are very involved with industry.
Yeah, they don't, but they're not able
to
sort of define it exactly, or they just sort of it's something they do without acknowledging it needs to be recorded or something like that. Is that?
Yeah, spot on. It's like breathing, I always say. It's because especially for trainers, because they've been a part of this industry often for a long time, and I guess where it might be that there's the gap is that it's about recording that evidence. We see it all the time where the engagement is happening, but the recording of the evidence is where the RTO falls down. And it's such a shame because, it's like all the hard work's done. It's just that that final piece for ASQA of maintaining that evidence where people fall down. Was there any other insights that you have?
Leonie, I can see in the chat that Catherine has pointed out no one was competent in maintaining marketing documentation. So that's an insight coming from
Yeah, great. And absolutely, and you'd expect at a bare minimum that your compliance manager would be across that. Yeah, and it's these things happen where there is a gap, and it's doing a mapping exercise like this can help to identify those. But yeah, that's a very important gap. Okay, well, it's really great to hear from some of you about what you discussed. Hopefully this is something you could also take away and look at adapting for your own organization. You can also map these types of roles to the revised standards and look and see, have we got everybody in place, all the right staff in place with the right experience to enable us to meet the revised standards. So yeah, it's an exercise to give you a starting point to explore this further. And it's also, if you do complete something like this for your RTO, it's a great way to show to ASQA that you have put thought into this. It's a really easy piece of evidence to put together. You know, obviously they don't expect you to have everything perfect, but they expect you to be working towards, if you do identify a gap, that you're working towards a way of fixing it as soon as possible. Are you on your end, Auburn, able to see my screen again? Or are we still on?
We're not. Once again, it's just your lovely face.
Oh, geez. Just trying to work out how to make that work. I jumped into a breakout room by accident and lost access to my screen. Give me 2 seconds.
I think also on that list could be policies and procedures as well as maintaining for all the new, you know, OSH, psychological hazards, all that stuff that's coming into how we look after our workers should be on that list of maintaining as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something I was something I was going to, you know, put in the questions, but I thought it might not be enough time today. But definitely that list is not exhaustive. It doesn't cover all of the things that you would be required to do as an RTO. It's sort of a snapshot of a few of them, but absolutely it's really worth working through in your organization all of the things that you need to cover off, and that would definitely be one of them. Yeah, so if you do go ahead and use that as a you know, a starting point for your own RTO, just bear in mind that it's just for a few of the responsibilities people would have, not for it's not a thorough not a thorough representation of all the jobs an RTO will have. You'll have even more than that, probably 4 times as much, I'd say. All right, I'm just going to have to change my screen manually like this. So your takeaways today, you've got a clear strategy for maintaining trainer competency and compliance. Definitely from the polls, it's clear that most of you are, you know, very good at that, already doing that, and know how to do that under the revised standards. You've got a tool that you can use for workforce gap analysis and development planning. And I'm sure you're all clear on the trainer and assessment credential requirements. It's a very complex document, that credential policy. So if you ever have doubts, always go back to that policy itself, I would say, and make sure that your trainers do meet those requirements. And it's obviously something you do as part of every onboarding process as well. And as I mentioned earlier, you'll also receive that PD tracking template that you can use for your entire team when we send out the follow-up to this webinar, when you get your recordings, etc. So I'd love to open it up for questions, and feel free to put them in the chat, or also and I'll work out how to access it on my end. And or just open up your videos or mics, one or the other, and ask away if there's any questions you've got from today's session.
Hi, Leonie. I'm Ranveer here from Cabot College.
Hi, Ranveer.
Yeah, just have a question regarding to the trainer competencies or industry currency. What if someone has recently migrated from overseas, probably in 1 year, back or 6 months ago, and can we match their industry currency with their, the overseas job?
Yeah, I mean, just because you've done a job overseas, it's just as valid as any other job. You just want to make sure you've got the evidence the same as you would for any job completed in Australia. One thing I will note is make sure, if you do employ trainers from overseas, that you are keeping evidence of their right to work in Australia. So we have seen RTOs get into some deep water with ASQA if they have not got evidence on file that that person can work in Australia. And there has been instances where trainers have been employed that didn't have the right to work in Australia. So you need to, it's something that every RTO might not think about. It's not really outlined in the standards. But it's a basic employment requirement to make sure that whatever trainer you have has that right to work in Australia. And that can be keeping, visa information on file, etc. It does cause a lot of complications if you get caught up in a situation like that. But as far as their experience, experience earned anywhere in the world is just as valuable as experience earned in Australia. So, you know, if they, as long as it's just all about the evidence, and that might require, you know, a letter to be translated, etc., if it's written in another language. So, you know, there might be some extra steps there, but it's certainly just as valid as experience gained anywhere else.
Now, it's just as an example, one of our trainers, she has overseas qualifications, overseas experience, but has a positive skill assessment from our peak body here, so which is a great sign that they have validated her qualifications. And also she's remotely engaged with the company overseas as meeting the currency industry, because she does work with them on an ongoing basis. I think it should be acceptable.
Yeah, that sounds very acceptable. But I'd say, but make it all about the evidence, because that's what all ASQA cares about is evidence. You know, at the end of the day, yes, outcomes and evidence. So, make sure, you know, if she is working for an overseas organization, that you need to think about what kind of evidence you'll provide to show that that's happening. Generally, a letter is well accepted. A letter from someone at the company just confirming what her duties are and, you know, how often she does them, etc.
All right. Oh, thank you.
Leonie, were you able to get the chat up on your end, or would you like me to read out a question?
You can read it out, because I since I went into the breakout room, I lost access to everything.
That's all good. You're flying blind. So we have someone who's asked, besides the trainer matrix, what other types of documents will need to be mapped to the credential policy?
What other types? I'd probably need to take that as a question on notice, because, you know, for me, it's not something I can tell you off the top of my head. There will be, so the credential policy is covering everything around your, about what qualifications your trainers need to be able to deliver training and assessment. And obviously there's a lot in there as well about the arrangements for working under supervision for trainers as well. And, you know, they're something that, you know, for me, I need to look at them closely to work out each time to work out, okay, what applies in this case, because it can, there's so many different ways of making sure your trainer's qualified. There's so many, you know, so many roads to Rome, as they might say. So
an example of that, Leonie, would be that in the cookery training package, you also have to hold your certificate 3 in commercial cookery or trade certificate. So that would be something that you have to have alongside your training matrix for that particular unit, all those units. So I just know of that one as an example. And I think with plumbing, there's one, and electrical as well. They have to hold their license as well on top of their matrix, just as off the top of my head.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, obviously your trainer evidence, everything in your trainer evidence file is going to be linked to your credential, to the credential policy. But yeah, as far as other documents, I'd have to look into it and do a bit of a research project on that one. But the credential policy is covering all the requirements that your trainers need to meet to be deemed by ASQA to be able to deliver training and assessment. So any document that relates to that subject area will most likely relate to the credential policy.
Thank you, Leonie. So it looks like we don't have any other questions coming into the chat.
Sorry, I have one more, and this might sound a bit silly, but
no silly questions. All questions are great.
You know, with all the upgrades to the qualifications, even in the TAE now it says work effectively in. Yeah. In my experience, when I've gone through audits, the auditors actually looked at they're holding the exact unit of competency, not necessarily just the qualification. So if I use individual support as an example, that's got work effectively in disability, work effectively in aged care. And now my trainers have been working and are still currently working in the field, but they don't hold that specific unit of competency, and they've mapped it. They've described how they work effectively by looking at, you know, the unit descriptor, but actually using their own experience. But auditors have actually asked for the exact unit that they don't hold that. Even in ECEC, you know, there's the new one about complaints. And we've been working in children's services, but don't hold the exact unit. What would you suggest in a situation like that?
Yeah, I always go back to the legislation, because what we're seeing in ASQA a lot is that there's some very inexperienced auditors out there, and you never know who you're going to get. You know, and you have to be sometimes prepared to argue your case based on the legislation. You know, it's sort of it's ridiculous to expect every trainer to hold the exact unit that they're delivering, that if they've got the qualification, you know, every RTO delivers qualifications in a different way, might have different electives, etc. And, you know, sometimes your unit's superseded. You know, I haven't seen what you're referring to. It sounds like quite an unusual case. It almost sounds to me like it's an inexperienced auditor or an auditor who's going over something very quickly without really looking into it and looking at the legislation. Because yeah, my understanding is, you know, you do need to show that you have industry currency, but not necessarily that exact unit of competency. So yeah, it'd be good to find out a bit more about that particular case. But you know, as far as, you know, the way that I approach it is that, you know, you don't need every trainer doesn't need to hold the exact unit of competency that they're delivering. They often, we have trainers all the time that we go to audit and they've got a superseded unit of competency, or they've got they don't have that unit of competency at all because they studied the same qualification at a completely different RTO. And that RTO didn't have that particular elective or whatever it might be, but there's you know, it would be ridiculous for a carpenter, for example, who's working in the industry, just because they don't have an elective unit that the RTO they're working at trains in, to not be able to deliver training because they don't have that exact unit. That, you know, that to me it's very strange reasoning by ASQA. And I would, if it happened to me, I would be questioning it. And certainly if you can demonstrate industry currency, that wouldn't make any sense to me.
Thank you.
Any other questions out there?
We don't
Yes,
have any more. Oh, sorry.
just one from me, sorry.
Yep.
Hello.
Ranveer.
Yes, just another one. The PDs, you know, what we do is, does that part of the become the part of continuous improvement?
Yeah, I think definitely, especially if you've identified a gap, you know, like you might have done doing a competency matrix, and you say, oh, we've discovered that, you know, our team, you know, it needs to be better at checking marketing requirements, for example. Then you know, you might send 1 or 2 team members to do professional development on marketing and compliance. Or you might get someone to come in and do some training with them. And then you would definitely document that on your continuous improvement register. And I think most RTOs I see with their continuous improvement register don't use it enough, because they're improving things every day, every couple of days. They've got something of note to record, but they don't do it. They leave it for just the big things. But ASK was interested in everything, and really the more detail you can have in that document, the more supportive it is if you do go to audit for any reason. And I've heard, you know, straight from ASQA's mouth on many occasions that they really do view that continuous improvement register as the main compliance document. You know, it's something that they can really see how an RTO is operating if that register is maintained really well.
Yeah, I think we have been doing it, you know, ignoring a little things, then thinking, you know, it may not be relevant, or, you know, why just go the effort putting a very little thing on the continuous improvement, even if we are doing it. So I think we should start.
Absolutely. And if you can see any way that the changes you're making are related to the revised standards, it's also a great way to show this is how we're we're conforming with the revised standard. And this is, this is the improvements we're making, because every RTO will be making many hundreds of improvements under the revised standards for RTOs. And just because it's legislated doesn't mean it doesn't count. It does count. And in fact, it's really more important than ever to record that information. It's also a really valuable document for your team to see what they've achieved. I know when I've used continuous improvement, and we used to, in the last RTO I worked at, every Friday, the managers would meet for 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, and work together to update the continuous improvement register. And even though that could be a real pain at times when you've got deadlines and you've got so much else going on, just making that space each week to record those improvements was so valuable, and really, really supported that organization to go through audit really, really well. So I think, even though there was lots of issues, and that yes, some people can be very nervous, and you've got to realize that yes, this will become under the eyes of ASQA. So you've got to be very careful with the way that you record the improvements that you're making. If you do notice that there's a non-compliance, it's not about, it's just about being smart about the way you record it and the improvements that you're making. But most likely, if ASQA is doing an audit, they're going to discover things anyway. And if they've seen that you've already had your eyes on it and you've already looked at a solution and have got something in place, that's really, a best case scenario. So it's better to have it on there than to not have it on there.
Nice. Thanks, Leonne.
Thanks. Okay, well, I think that wraps it up. Thank you so much to everyone for attending. Our next webinar, the very final one of this series, is on the 31st of July. So Thursday, 31st of July, the final lap. Some of you will have come to all 6 webinars, which will be amazing. We really appreciate your support through this, our first webinar series. And we'll make sure the next one really goes out with a bang. So please do come along if you can, and there will be we will come up with another great free giveaway with that one as well. So yes, we'd love to see you all there. Thanks so much. Okay, bye.
Thanks, Leonie. Bye.